In part 4 of our After Effects video tutorial series, we talk about motion and how we can track motion in a video. Hi and welcome back to this series. Here is a little sequence that I shot the other day, and you can see that if I play it, you can see that it's a handheld shaky footage, and I made it extra shaky because we're trying to track some elements, and we're going to take a look at the one-way street sign and see how it actually moves. Let's bring the footage into After Effects and see how it's done. So here's the project folder, and I'm going to double-click the background, and I'm going to load the footage into After Effects. And to start a new composition, of course, I could use the function here, new composition from footage, but what I'm doing is I'm taking the footage and I pull it onto the new composition window, which automatically creates a composition the same size of my footage. The footage, by the way, is 30 frames per second, and it's a 4K footage, so it's like twice HD resolution, and it's about 6 seconds long. So the first thing that I would like to show you is how you can quickly track motion by hand. And so we're going to focus our attention on the one-way street sign and see how it moves in our footage. If I move my time slider, you can quickly see that the camera is moving around, it's rolling a little bit, and all kinds of things. So we try to take a look at the sign. So to track it, what I'm doing is I'm placing a layer, just any graphic symbol on top. So just by not selecting any layer, I'm going to choose an ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw an ellipse around my sign. Don't make it too small, so we're not getting too close. So the next thing is, now I'm going to show you how to easily track it by hand. Of course, it will not be perfect, but I just want to show you one thing that you should keep in mind when you track motion by hand. So I move my time slider to the beginning of my animation sequence, and I want to track all the 6 seconds of my video. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, and I'm now adjusting the position of my graphic element. And the thing is, when you're starting to track, I'm going to track it by animating the position of my graphic element, of my shape layer. So I'm going to select the shape layer, and you know from the last sessions, if you go to P, you will open the position, and what I'm going to do is I am going to lock the position of my shape. Oh, sorry, it's not the shape layer, actually shape layer's position, sorry, it is the ellipse position, transform, sorry, here, this one, the ellipse position. So I move it to the correct place, and I hit animate. So now what you want to do is you want to animate the position, so you move to a different point in time, and you move it following the sign. What you can do is, if the motion is not too long, you can start with setting one keyframe at the beginning and one keyframe at the end. And now I choose a different point in time, and now I'm going to move my object again roughly so it's centered. Now I have a keyframe at the beginning and at the end, and now I'm starting to divide it into pieces. So I'm going to the middle, and again animate it to a different point. So I have now 3 keys, and I'm always taking the sequence between 2 keys, and I'm going to put it in half. So here's another one, and another one here, and so on and so forth. And I'm back. So now I have a lot of keyframe already, and if I get out of the frame, you can see when I hit play, it kind of follows the sign. Of course, not every little detail, but it stays on the sign and so on. So this is a quick and dirty way to track something. Of course, you cannot get too close to the object because then you see the wobbling. And if you do in the last round, you go to the places where it wobbles or where where it's off the most and you add some specific keyframes at this point, you can smooth it out quite well. So that is a simple solution for tracking something. Of course, not the best. So in the next step, I'm going to show you how to use the tracking function in After Effects to track such a picture. I am taking the shape layer that I already have and turn it off, because now I'm going to track it, of course, much more precise. And if you look at the sign here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, I'm going to place a tracking marker, and if you place a tracking marker, it is important that you pick a position that can be easily tracked, for example a corner of something or the arrow in the front here, so you can hardly track anything like a wire or like an edge. You always need something like a corner and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my animation to the set my footage to the very beginning, and here on the right side you should see the tracker. I just open it. If you don't have the tracker, you will always find it here under Window, and here's the tracker that you can open. So there's different ways to track objects, track motion, track cameras. We're going to do more in the next tutorials, but for right now we want to start with simple track motion. So, but before we track the motion, what we need. So we don't need the shape layer, we have our video. What we need is, we need a null object, our little dummy that we can use for linking something to it and so on. So I'm going to create a new dummy. So you go to Layer, New, sorry, it's not called dummy, null object. And here is my object called null1. So now I'm going to track my movie. So therefore you select the layer that you want to track, you go into your tracker and use track motion. You've seen the layer that I selected here has been opened in a new window. So now we're not seeing the composition, but we're seeing the layer window, and in the middle of the layer there is a track point 1. The track point 1 is really small because this is a 4K footage, so I'm going to see track point 1. I'm going to take the tracker and make it larger. It's made out of 2 rectangles or squares, you can change the aspect ratio, and a little dot, a tick in the middle. So what you want to do is you want to place the middle point right at the point that you want to track, and when you move it you can see it's like a magnifying glass that makes sure that you really find the perfect spot. Also make sure that those 2 rectangles are large enough that going from one frame to the next, the picture is not jumping out of this frame. So if the motion is really strong and it jumps like from one frame to the other, like far out, then you have to make the tracking point larger. But in this case, I guess it's enough to have a tracking point of about this size. What exactly the frames do, and within I always make sure it's large enough so it's not jumping out. So we're ready. We have the tracking point 1 set on the right layer, and now here's the button. Make sure you're at the beginning of the timeline and you hit Analyze. Analyze forward, and now it's starting to analyze the motion and following it frame by frame. I want you to also follow it visually, so look at it and make sure this dot always stays at the right. Sorry, I'm zooming out a little bit. If you stop it by accident, no problem, you can always stop it. You can even go 1 or 2 steps back, check if it's still on, and then hit Analyze Forward, and it will continue to analyze it. So let's quickly pause it here and wait till it's finished. Our tracking is finished, and the tracking point number 1, track point number 1, stayed precisely on the marker. Sorry, I just messed up something. It stayed precisely on the marker if we zoom in, so it's still right there at the point. So the next step is now that we tracked our motion on the movie layer. What we're going to do is we're going to hit here the button. We analyzed it forward. We use the edit target, and what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the null object as a motion target. So the motion that we have tracked will now be applied to the motion target layer layer number 2, the null 1. So here's the target set to null 1, and now if I hit apply, and I'm going to use apply both dimensions, not only up and down or left right, I'm using both dimensions x and y, and now the motion will be applied to the null object. If I close this now, you can see it right away, because now the null object, which is just a little rectangle that you see here, little rectangle, now with its top left corner sticks to the point that we have tracked. And if we move our animation, you can see it always stays there. So it feels like the null object is glued to the object itself. And now we can do whatever we want, because anything that we now add additionally, we can just link to the null object and it will stay perfectly there. For example, I could add some new shape. This time I'm going to do another shape layer. I'm going to create a rectangle with rounded edges. I'm just drawing something as I did before around and I'm here at the beginning of my animation, around my picture, and maybe even some text elements. So on the same shape layer, I'm also going to draw a piece of line. Oh, sorry. Let's do it like this. Piece of line, like this. Let's move it a little bit. So here and here. And let's add some text as well. Write one-way street. So like this. My street is a little big. Like this. And now, in order to make the graphic elements that I added stick to the sign, all I need to do is use the shape layer, which is shape layer number 2, and the one-way street sign, and use the parent, set the parent to the null object. So shape layer number 2, here's parent null, and one-way street here, parent null. So it means whatever null object is doing in terms of position, rotation, scale, and so on, all the others will follow. So let's see how that looks like. If I now move my time slider, you can see both the text and the element stick perfectly to the sign. So it's perfectly tracked. Even when I run it, you can see every little motion will follow. So that is a nice way to track motion with a null object. So let's quickly repeat it. If it's something quick and you wanna just add something and you wanna add a certain motion to it, you can simply do it by hand, animate it. The technique is not to do every single step, but you just do the beginning, the end, and then just divide it into half pieces and adjust the position. The other way is to automatically track it. So you need a null object and the video that you want to track. Then you open the tracker, you add a tracking point and let it analyze. That will take 1 or 2 minutes depending on the length, or can even be longer. And then you transfer the motion of the tracker onto the null object. So that was the tutorial about how to track the motion by tracking a certain point, apply the motion to a null object, and then add some graphic elements and link them, or choose as their parent, choose the animated null object. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.